I'm Jera Stone, and we have with us in studio for our grand return, Victoria Maxwell, or Vix. How you doing, Vix?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, and how exciting to be here on your return episode.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. It's all my fault, listeners. I'm sorry. But
No. It is not your fault. Just bad luck happened. And we had to pivot, and that's all that happened.
It just took us a very long hot minute to pivot. That's it. I needed to grieve. I needed to deal. Problems with moving. Maybe we'll talk about it on a mini-sode sometime in the future. If you don't already know, it's also up on social media and on our Patreon page, so you have a better idea. But I don't want to make this all about me, because Vix is here, and that means it's all about Vix.
Yes.
So, and a lovely good morning in Australia to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's bright and early.
Bright and early, yeah.
Is the sun even out yet?
It's just starting to come up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the sun is just starting to set for me.
It's still blazing hot in the middle of the day, in the middle of the sky for me. I got to gloat a little bit after moving from the desert. It was 78 all day today. I hate you with a burning passion. I hate you. I still love you, but I hate
you. The burning passion of 111 degrees.
I mean, luckily the past couple of days it's been okay. The weather has actually stayed a little bit cooler just because of some rain, some cloud cover. It is our monsoon season. So we have been dealing with a little bit of dust, but other than that, it's actually not as bad, but it still feels like walking out into a swimming pool.
Boy. And then it's winter, almost spring for you, right?
Yeah, it's winter. So we're cold. I'm cold.
I'm ready for cold to come back. So we'll take it for our turn, and then you can have it back for your turn.
Yeah. That's
the way it goes. Anyway, so Vix, you're here because you wrote a book that I have read, Red Wheel actually published it. It is called Witch Police: Empowerment and Enlightenment for the Modern Mystic. And obviously we're going to talk a lot about this, but before we dive into your book, I would like to ask you to share your coming of witch story, which I know you do talk about in the beginning of the book. So any non-spoilers you want to give?
Yeah. Oh, I love talking about this because I feel like my story is a little bit different than other people's. And yeah, so I kind of always felt like I was a little bit witchy and spiritual in some way. I think a lot of people can relate to this, but I was the kid who was collecting rocks and fascinated with crystals and all of that kind of stuff before I even knew, anything about witchcraft and magic, pretending to make spells in the backyard and making potions out of the flowers that I could find and stuff like that. And as I kind of got older, started to find out more about witchcraft. And one of the, big moments for me was when The Craft came out in the 90s. Which is like kind of an embarrassing way to admit that, you got into witchcraft because you saw a movie. But I know so many people who kind of had really similar experiences around that time. That was like
at least half the people I know that are in it are like that. That was my start, was when The Craft came out.
Yeah, I know, it's so cliche. But it was so great, right? Like seeing this movie where there was this group of teenage girls, and at the time, I think it was 1995, and I was in high school then. And yeah, it was like, these girls with this like power, and it was like they were really kind of trying to take it back. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Obviously, it went on a turn towards the end there, and we all learned some lessons about, what to do with your power. which I think was important as well. But yeah, that was kind of like, around that time, I was starting to kind of visit the local crystal shops in my area, and get really interested in, what is this? Like, is this real? Is this a real thing that you can do? And yeah, kind of went into it from there. And then a group of my friends, like a couple of my friends who were quite into it, kind of more into it than I was at that point, invited me to be in their coven. And I was like, okay, I'll be in your coven, cool. And that was a really interesting experience. A lot of like really kind of magical things started happening, and we were all a little bit freaked out, to be honest, at the time. At least I was anyway. I was like, oh my gosh, like this actually works. Like the idea of it is really cool. And then you start doing it and you're like, this is like almost too, like it's too much, the fact that this works. So, I kind of went on my own path from there. Like the coven disbanded, and I was still very much into it. So I was doing like my own practices and stuff, but there was still this little part of me that was like a little bit scared of it, because I didn't really, I feel like at that time I didn't really understand it, and I didn't also have any understanding at all of like spiritual protection or how to kind of keep myself safe when I was doing this stuff. So I was kind of always a little bit on edge when I was like, I'm going to do a spell, but kind of always like, oh my God, what if it happens? What if it doesn't happen? And then I kind of went on this really interesting journey where I started hanging out with a new group of friends who were Christian. And I kind of fell into this kind of friendship group, and eventually they started asking me, do you want to come to church? And I was like, no, like church is not my thing. I'm not going to do that. Eventually I kind of wore me down, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll come to church with you and see what this is about. Like maybe there are some of the, the answers that I'm looking for. Maybe I can find some of them here. I don't know. So I kind of went along, and then long story short, I became a born-again Christian for a little while, and that was a really interesting experience. But after a few years of being in the church, I kind of started to see through the cracks a little bit, and I was like, this isn't fulfilling me, like this isn't answering all my questions. And, I think a lot of people who have an experience in the church, we start asking questions like, where are the women? Like, where is, Mother Mary comes out once a year at Christmas, and like the rest of the time it's, it's all about the masculine. And there are like quite a few other things, like I could never get behind the aspect of Christianity that this is the one way, and everybody else is wrong. Like I could never really kind of back that idea. So, eventually I kind of left the church and went back on my path of, I don't know what this path is, but I'm still spiritual. I still believe in, some of this stuff. But yeah, and then it was kind of this long, slow journey for years and years where I would, pick up crystals or pick up tarot deck or, all these different kind of witchy things. And then it was only really around 2011 that I kind of got this nudge to really get back on the path. I was kind of going through, which I think is, a lot of us get back on the path when we're going through hard times, right? Or like, oh, I'm not feeling, I'm getting older and I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And is this it? Like, is it just do your 9 to 5 and come home and have a beer and then do your 9 to 5? And like, is this life? Like, is this as good as it gets? So yeah, I kind of started to get back onto my path, I guess. And I had this tarot deck that I'd kind of been carrying around with me for a really long time through different phases of my life. And very occasionally I'd get it out and have a little bit of a read. And and put it back. But I kind of started to really get the call to get the cards back out and, actually really work out how to read them instead of just turn the cards over and look at the guidebook, which I've been doing for many years. And that was kind of the point that led me to where I am now, where I kind of started to, reconnect with the tarot. I started to learn how to protect my energy. And I talk a lot about that in the book because it was something that really had like such a huge impact for me. I was working in a really kind of challenging work environment at that time, with a lot of people who were really negative, and I was really negative too. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't. I wasn't just as bad as everybody else at that time, but I wanted to change. I didn't want to feel like that anymore. I kind of wanted to have a different experience. So I started working with energy protection. And then when I started doing that, I started to be able to hear my own intuition and my spirit guides more clearly. And then I got the nudge to start a spiritual blog, which originally was just supposed to be about me sharing my own experiences with kind of getting back on the spiritual path. So I started to blog about the crystals I was using and some of my thoughts on the tarot and things like that. And people started to resonate with what I was saying, which I thought was really cool. Then eventually I was kind of like, I wonder if, people like what I'm saying about the tarot. I wonder if I could do some tarot readings for people. Didn't really think that was going to become a thing. But anyway, it did. People liked my readings, and that was cool. Very, very unexpected. And then it kind of just went from there. And then I started to teach these little online classes, teaching people how to protect their energy and basically do all the things that I've been figuring out for the last few years. And then it just kind of, from there, it just kind of started to grow. And, one day I got the email from the publishers asking me, the book was actually originally published by HarperCollins in the UK. And then Red Will Weiser had picked it up for the US. So I got this email from HarperCollins and they were like, hey, do you want to write a book about being a witch? And I was like, this is pretty cool, but so not where I thought I was going to be at this point in my life, but okay, let's do it. So that's basically my story. The very short version of it, but yeah.
I like kind of like the dichotomy where, a lot of witches that we've talked to, they start out in the Christian or Catholic Church and then become witches. Whereas you kind of turned it on its head a little bit. You're starting off kind of getting this natural inkling of the craft, of things that are already out there, and then you go into the church. What kind of, like, how did that, at least at the time and looking back onto it, how did that affect you in your own spiritual practice?
It is interesting. Like, I started going to church, I was about 17, 18. So a lot of my friends were kind of going in a really different direction at that age, right? And I was like, I'm going to church. Having said that, we did used to, the drinking age in Australia is 18. So we used to go out drinking on a Saturday night, and then we'd go to church. We'd go to church the next morning, which is, some people frowned upon that, but it was really interesting. I think, part of it was, I was so drawn to the practices of witchcraft, but I was also a little bit scared of it. Like I said, I didn't know how to protect my energy. I didn't have anybody guiding me. I was just learning from books at that time. We didn't have YouTube back in those days, or podcasts like this. So it was like, you got your information from books. Which sometimes you read them properly and sometimes you didn't. Sometimes you skipped to the good bits, right? Like, so when I kind of first stepped into the church, there were a lot of things about it that I felt like I really needed at that time. So there was there was this group of young people at that church who just were very welcoming and very friendly, and it kind of felt a little bit like coming home in a way. It was like they they just took me in with open arms, which I was like, I'd never experienced that before in my life, like, wow, people are just accepting me and they want to be my friend just because I'm here. Like, this is unusual. This is cool. And that was really, really interesting. And then, I think one of the biggest parts about it for me was I felt really safe in Christianity, at least the church that I went to, which was, I'm not going to say it was that progressive, but it was a lot more progressive than some other churches. Like, we had a lot of, we were never like, this church was never kind of anti-gay or anti, anybody. It was kind of a little bit more progressive than that. But I always kind of felt really safe there. And, eventually you kind of start to see that, okay, these people are really nice to my face, but then you hear, oh, so-and-so was talking about you and said that, and it's like, okay, like the illusion starts to kind of shatter a little bit. But, even when I kind of left the church, there were still a lot of aspects of the Christian path that I've actually kind of taken with me into my, my witchy path. And sometimes I call myself a Christian witch, and people don't always like that because it kind of, brings up a lot of stuff for people, especially I know so many people have experienced trauma in the church. And, I was really lucky that I didn't experience that. And I think coming into it later kind of helped me to, have kind of a little bit, I was a bit more sure in who I was, like not loads, but I was kind of, I was there from my own free will as well. Like, I was able to leave any time, whereas when you're born into it, it's a really different kind of situation. Yeah. So, like I had this weird situation where my family and my friends were like, what are you doing? Like, why are you going to church? Like, this is crazy. Instead of, trying to keep me in the church, it was really, like you said, it was turned on its head a little bit. But yeah, there was still a lot of things about Christianity that I did really like. And I think they're like the sort of core teachings of Christianity, like a lot of the things that Jesus said was really good advice, like love everybody. And, the thing I loved the most about Jesus was the scene where he goes into the temple and he kicks over all the tables. And I was like, that's my Jesus, like that's the kind of guy that, I want to follow. Like, that's really cool. So I kind of took Jesus out of the church and I was like, hey, let's go do witchcraft. And I feel like he really came with me, like I still talk to Jesus and Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary and the saints. But, like a lot of people do, I bring them into the path of the witch.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I actually just did a week-long witch camp where we were actually studying Mary Magdalene and kind of the whole encompassing of her priestessing. And also when she did follow Yeshua or Jesus, Emmanuel, whatever language that you speak or say his name in. And coming from, I mean, personally, I was one of those forced to go every Saturday and sometimes twice during the week Christians. Leaving the church, I feel the exact same way. I brought, and I call him Emmanuel, I brought him with me. And I even tell people, it's like literally he's a guy, like I don't worship him as a god or as a deity. He's just somebody who was there that I occasionally have beers with.
Love that.
And it's kind of funny because, like, especially with everything going on now that we have social media and we're seeing a lot of and I hate to use this term, but it's kind of true, the witch hunts that are starting up again. A lot of it, I see Emmanuel kind of sitting and just going, this is not what I taught. And just kind of shaking his head. And it's, number one, it's comforting to know that there are other people out there who have that kind of similar experience. But also it's just, it's good to hear that even though there's a lot of the Christian backlash, that people are seeing through the cracks and through the veils that are there, that the churches themselves are throwing up.
Yeah.
Well, I would definitely agree with what you said before you even dived into your story. When I was reading what you put in the book, to me, it rang true that it's very different than any other guest we've had or any other story I've heard. And that's why we have this segment, is that there's going to be somebody who hears what you're saying and goes, hey, that's my experience. I bounced between different spaces and I came back to witchcraft, but I brought these things that I learned and liked with it. And so that's important. And I appreciated it in your book, but it also kind of made me laugh. I'm like, I'm going to make her have to repeat everything she already wrote down.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. Yeah.
And I do appreciate, because I personally, and our listeners know this, I'm not that much of a reader. So hearing it rather than reading it, it's definitely, it comes off differently, especially from the person that wrote it.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely. There's portions of it when you're saying it comes off very differently than how I read it, especially your adventure through having a hard working environment, and how you dealt with that. It definitely, the way you said it kind of changed my opinion of how I read it. So.
And now that you're on this side of the pulpit, I guess, because I know you say, you do kind of integrate what you've learned in the church into your daily practice. What are a couple of things that you yourself kind of do for your daily practice that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, my daily practice is kind of like a hot mess these days. So I usually start with a little bit of Kundalini yoga, because that's like another one of the paths that I've kind of ended up going down. And I do some breath work and I do a little bit of chanting. And then I do some energy work, which I kind of took from like the Reiki, the Reiki path. Do a little version of that, like, clearing myself and my space. And and then I kind of take some time. One of the things that I call in all of my friends, and Jesus is always included in that list. And that list has got longer and it gets longer and longer every time, which I think a lot of people can relate to. It's like, oh, you start off with maybe like, oh, these are my two deities that I call on. And then, my list is just, it gets very long. So, it takes like 20 minutes just to kind of like call all my friends in and say hi. And then I like to spend a little bit of time just in gratitude. And, I sit at my altar and I just kind of go through and just say, like, what am I really grateful for? And then I do a kind of what I would probably call like saying my prayers, but it's like a witchy version of that. It's like setting intention, saying prayers, like, this is what I want from my day. This is the things that I could use some help with. And then after I've done all of that, I usually sit and like pull some cards for myself, some oracle or some tarot, and just kind of check in that way. And then sometimes I kind of do a deeper meditation. or sometimes I just go and get on a podcast and I have a chat about stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like a really interesting mix of things. And, for a long time, actually, when I got out of the church and got back on this path, I was really reluctant to call myself a witch, because my path was kind of like, oh, it's energy healing and it's connecting with Jesus and it's like yoga and it's like all these different things. So it actually took me a while to kind of reclaim that, that title for myself. And I remember when I was, as a teen, around the time of the craft and everything, I remember I actually went to a Catholic high school, and I used to wear my pentagram like so loudly and proudly, like I'm a witch at this Catholic school. And I was like so proud to be a witch in that space. I think part of it was like rebelling against, what everyone else was doing. But yeah, it was really interesting that it took me quite a few years to realize that actually what I do, like I am a witch, and what I'm doing is witchcraft, even if it's not kind of like traditional Wicca or, looks the same as other people's versions of witchcraft. So, yeah.
I call it cobblestone witchery. It's
I like that.
Literally taking facets from different religions, different sects, just to kind of forge your own path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely relate to that.
And I think on that note, we'll take a short break.
Back from break, and we still have Vix here with us, and we're going to go in a little bit more in depth into the book. Now, Autumn, I know that you have a copy of the book and you've been reading through. What are your thoughts on it so far?
I think from what I've read, I think you really did do what you wanted to do, what you set out to do. You told me that you wanted to write the book that you would have needed and wanted when you started. That you really did write a book that is very helpful to newbies. I would say you kind of gave a bare bones skeleton of everything that all witches need at the beginning. And that's hard to do in a book. That you could like all the feet bones. I mean, I don't say that as a bad thing. I say that as a good thing. Like all those little bones that you need, you got that skeleton built. And that's very important, because sometimes you don't get every single little bit that you really kind of would need to start practicing. Mm-hmm. And I would say that you gave the important information that sometimes is missed in newbies. Obviously, from what you experienced, you did give the protection portions, like here's how to protect yourself, here's how to do from start to finish this important stuff, the building of your own practice and how to do magic safely. I appreciated that you did say and remind throughout that the magic isn't from your tools, it isn't from the outside, it's from within.
Yeah, I think that was such a really the message of the book, really. Mm-hmm. It's just, the message of the book is almost like, you don't really need this book. Like you can just, go your own way and do your own thing as long as it feels good and it helps you with, helps you in your life to kind of go where you want to go and experience life in the way that you want to experience it.
Definitely. I also liked there were certain sections that I haven't seen in witchy books before or yet that is very time appropriate. Like protecting yourself on the internet and shielding and how to handle internet emotions or TV emotions. I've heard other people, like other witchy books, write about like covering your TV screen or always having it on. The black screen isn't good. I've heard stuff like that, but like you're going in and talking about like that's going to bring emotion and feeling and energy into your house, what you watch affects not only you, but your house. And that I liked, because when I was in a relationship where we would have really bad fights, I would have to go in and smudge. And I never really thought, hey, what I'm watching might also give that lingering energy throughout the house as well. And I really liked that you brought that up, and kind of that's where I started thinking, and that's what started engaging my brain.
Yeah, and I think it's it's not to say that, because I know like some spiritual books and witchy books will say like never watch anything negative, never like like never have a negative conversation, or never watch anything that's a little bit dark or scary or creepy. And I don't think that's the answer, unless of course you don't want to personally. Right. Then that's cool.
Apparently those people have never turned on a TV or been on the internet more than 5 minutes in their life.
Right.
Well, like I'm a criminologist, and people in my house aren't. So I can watch very violent, very terrible real life things that happen and not blink an eye and it not bother me. But if it's playing while my roommates are playing WoW, they are affected on a whole level I can't even comprehend. And it's like being conscious of that, and not only like it doesn't affect you now, but that energy, that feeling, that thought, like you might still be thinking about it when you go to bed. And most people know that, like it comes up in your dreams, but then that's sitting in your house. It's sitting under your roof.
Yeah, but it's easy to clear that, right?
Yes, it is. And it's the same way you would clean up any other energy. It's just being conscious that is necessary. And maybe that is something that you need to remember to clean up before you do magic. It's so easy to enjoy a horror film on Samhain and then go do your magic and not think, hey, I need to let that go too. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I was just going to say, like, social media for me has been, like, I didn't notice for ages. Like, I thought, I just pick up my phone and scroll and put it down, and it's not, it's no big thing. But then I started to feel like every time I opened my phone and looked at Instagram, I was kind of opening up this portal of energy that was like affecting me, affecting my space, affecting everyone around me, because it was affecting me. So yeah, that was like an interesting kind of realization as well.
Yeah.
I wonder how many of our listeners are going just like, mind blown right now.
Yes. Only follow things that bring you joy. Even I'm a big proprietor of read the news, know what's going on in your world. I know it's hard, it hurts, but know what's happening, have an idea of, because you're walking through that energy. Just because we're on different continents than Ukraine doesn't mean that Ukraine isn't affecting us, whether we know about what's happening there or not. And whether whether there's a COVID surge or not, or monkeypox or any of these things, the news is depressing, but being aware of those things helps you defend against those things.
Yeah, I'm a fan of knowing what's going on. But for me, I don't like to watch the news, but I follow the news online. So I have more control about, when and where and, which articles I'm kind of deciding to click on and, get my headlines. And I'm like, I want to hear more about that, rather than, sit down and watch 2 hours of the news just playing, the same thing over and over again, all the footage and everything. Yeah.
I do the same exact thing.
Yeah, I'm very selective where it comes to where I get my news from, because I don't subscribe to just being of a linear thought when it comes to the news. I want to hear, I do want to hear both sides of the story, and I want to be able to make my own educated judgment on it. And that's what I look for when I look for my news. Like, honestly, on YouTube, there's a guy who does the news. He is biased, but when it comes to presenting the news, he gives all different aspects of it. And he's just saying, this isn't, I'm not going to give you my opinion on this. This is for you to formulate your own opinion, but here is what we know. These are all the facts. And I've noticed ever since, looking towards news sources like that, it's a lot easier to stomach the news.
And going back to your book, I liked that you did mention making sure to take breaks from social media and things like that. And one of the things I highly suggest is going through your social media. And if you have somebody who is a negative Nancy or a negative Nilly or whatever word you want to use, I have a coworker who's Nancy, so she doesn't like that phrase very much. But if you have somebody who is always harping on the negative, if you're not into turning off your social media 100%, you can snooze that person. You can take a 30-day break, see if they're doing better later on, see if your emotions are doing better. You could block somebody and you can unblock them if you need to. Or I always say unfollow somebody. Like if it's a family member that you still need to be friends with on Facebook, you can unfollow them. They don't need to show up on your feed. You don't need that every day. And that's a big part of what I do all the time. I reassess, is this somebody I want to interact with on a daily basis? Now that I've moved away from a majority of my friends, it's like, okay, is this somebody that I do want to keep in touch with? Because this is how we keep in touch in the 21st century. So I liked your reminder of taking those breaks for yourself is very important for your energy. That does affect your magic. It does affect your practice. It affects which gods and which spirits come at you or you can invite in. Sometimes they're like, I don't want to touch you with a 90-foot pole. You're covered in yuck. And sometimes they're like, oh, I like the yuck.
Yeah. And I think, like I've read so many books that talk about energy protection in this way of, well, it's white light and it's casting circles and it's candles and it's crystals. But sometimes you do just have to unfollow people that are making you feel bad. And to me, that's a huge, huge part of it, avoiding those situations that are completely draining you and just, that's it. That's energy protection, right?
So what other big points do you have in the book that you want somebody to pick up the book and just say, this specifically speaks to me?
That's a good question. I think, like we already said, that part of the magic is within you, and it's really about your intention and living an intentional, conscious life. Like, to me, that's what magic is. And I think, in my experience, I think a lot of people experience this too, especially when you're at the beginning of your path. We do the spells and we do all the things that the books tell us to do. But if you don't have that sort of intentional, conscious piece working with you, it kind of just becomes this lip service of, oh, I'm going to do this spell and then, carry on my life as usual. Like, oh, I'm going to do a spell for protection because I feel like everyone's against me and everybody wants something from me and I can't handle it. And then you do your spell and you go on social media, like looking at, so-and-so is like, oh, why is this person? Oh, I'm like, why am I always feeling like this or whatever? So I think, a big part of the book was that I really tried to include, you've got the witchy part of the work, which of course we know that it works. You've got that part that's like, okay, you're setting the intention and you're doing the spell and you're creating the thing or, whatever it is. But then once you're done, you're kind of taking the action steps in the 3D world. And that was, something that I had to learn on my journey, that, it's, and I mean, there's always that spell that you do where you do just do the spell and you forget all about it and something happens and it's like, wow, that was great. That happened for me in that perfect way. But I found in my magic most of the time, like, you do your spell and then you do your work, and that's how you create the magic. So yeah, it was really important to me to kind of touch on that. You've done the spell, now what? Rather than here's another book of spells where a spell for everything that you could ever want, but what do you do once the spell's done? Do you just live your life as normal? Do you just kind of forget that you ever did it? Or do you then try to like kind of take that spell with you? And one of the things I really love about Kundalini yoga is they talk about that you can put things into your aura. And I really love that. And I always think that, when we're doing a spell, when we're doing some kind of magic, it's like you're putting that into your aura. And then you're carrying that with you. It doesn't just, the candle remains don't just kind of stay on the altar or go in the bin. It's like that work that you've done, that magical work, it becomes a part of you. And then you can move through the world kind of carrying that instead of just, that's my magic and that's my life. It kind of all starts to become part of you, which I think is a really cool way of thinking about it.
In writing and preparing for this book, what was something that you yourself kind of learned and kind of took away from the process of the creation of this?
Oh, I love that question. I think for me, like a huge part of it was, I'd been trying to manifest some sort of like book deal, or, I was thinking about writing, self-publishing a book, like some kind of magical witchy book. I've been thinking about that for a really, really long time. And I actually had a publisher get in touch with me about a year before HarperCollins did. And they were really keen to work with me. They took me out for drinks and stuff. And they were like, we really want to work with you. And I was like, it's happening. Like, this is it. Like, it's, this is moving forward. This is really cool. Like, I'm manifesting it. I'm making it happen. And at the last minute, we talked about contracts. We went through the whole conversation. And then I just didn't hear from them for ages. And I got back in touch and I was like, how's it moving forward? And they're like, oh yeah, we're not doing that now. And I was like, okay, dreams dashed. Like, spent a few days just being like, well, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. So, when this kind of second chance came around, I had a lot of kind of beliefs around, it's kind of carrying this like, don't get too excited because maybe it won't happen. And yeah, there was like a lot of stuff that I had to kind of deal with within myself around, can I actually do this? And who am I? The old question that always comes up, like, who am I to write a book about witchcraft? Like, it took me 20 years to even identify as a witch, like even use that word for myself. So I was kind of going through all of this internal struggle. And then kind of, by the time I came out the other side of that and I was like, okay, I can write this book. Like this is, if I wasn't supposed to write it or if I couldn't write it, I wouldn't have been asked to write it. So, I sat down to write it. By the time I sat down to write it, I had a month to complete the whole book. I was like, I can totally do this. This will be totally fine. So it ended up being this process where I was like, dealing with all of my inner stuff. And then I just got to the point where it's like, I just have to write this book now. Like, I just have to sit down and do it. And it was really a beautiful experience because I feel like it ended up being really easy. And I think it was easy because it was all of the stuff that I had been doing myself for so long. And I'd been teaching it to my students. And so it was kind of like, it was just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to kind of, share really quickly sit down. It was almost like, I'm really quickly going to sit down with someone who's starting on this journey and just share with them everything that I know. And it was just kind of like, got to tell them about this and got to tell them about this other thing. And yeah, and then it kind of, luckily it all kind of happened. But I think it's really interesting because there's this idea in the spiritual community right now, where, like you see a lot of people are getting book deals, a lot of people are creating decks and, doing all of these things. And sometimes I think you look at that and you're like, oh, wow, that person must really, have it all together. But, everyone is like working through their stuff. And then of course, you send the manuscript and you're like, oh my gosh, like, what are they going to think of it? Like, what are they going to say? Is this even what they wanted? Yeah. And it's, then you go through that whole thing. And then they send back the edits and you work with them on that. And then, and then you think, oh, everything's fine now. And then the book comes out. And then you've got this whole next layer of, what are people going to think about this? You know, like, what are people going to say on the Amazon reviews and Goodreads reviews? And, you know, it's quite a ride. And I've had some really interesting reviews as well posted. A lot of people have said, you know, this is such a great book for beginners and it's really helped me on my path. But there's also been some people who were really disappointed that it wasn't witchy enough. You know, like it wasn't advanced and witchy enough. And it's kind of like, it's called Witch Please and it's pink. Like, what? I don't know what people are expecting from a pink book called Witch Please. Like, it is a beginner's book. It really is. You know, like I said, it's the book that I wanted like years and years ago to help me to kind of not just do the spells and connect with the deities, but also, you know, bring it into my life and help me to understand that this isn't just something that you do, you know, when you have a spare 20 minutes on the weekend. Like, this is a way of life. Like, this is, you know, how to live a magical life. So yeah, it's a real process, like writing the book and seeing it come out in the world. But yeah, it was amazing. But yeah, it wasn't always that easy at times.
Right.
So talking about looking at the book, how much input did you have on like the cover art and the name and things like that?
I love this question because when they told me what they wanted to call it, I was like, no. I was like, this is a serious book. Like, yes, it's for beginners, but there's still, you know, it's not like there's quite a few books out there at the moment that are kind of a bit tongue-in-cheek and they're kind of jokey and they're kind of like, you know, these little gift books that are you get the feeling that whoever wrote them may not even be like a practicing witch, you know.
I know what you mean.
So yeah. And so it's kind of like I wanted to have that feel that this is a beginner's book, but it's, you know, it's also, you know, it's serious. This is serious work, right? So when they said they wanted to call it Witch Please, I went back and forth with them so many times. I was like, you can't call it this. Like, you just can't. And then they were like, we think it's really empowering. And I was like, really? Really? And in the end, they were like, well, it's kind of too bad because, you know, we think this will sell. Like, this is what we want to call it.
Okay.
And then I was like, well, that's out of my hands. Right. But when they sent through the cover art, and I didn't have any input in the cover art at all. Like, they didn't even, you know, it wasn't even like, what do you think about this? It was just like, here's the cover. But when I saw it, I was like, this is beautiful. Like, this is really cute. So I really, really loved the cover. I thought that it was like so great. And different too, you know, like it was a different kind of cover than you usually see on a witchy book. And then like, you know, when it came out, it was really funny because a lot of people were like, when I started to tell people on social media about the name and share the cover, people were like, I love the name of this book. And I was like, really? They were like, it's so cool. And so many people have loved the name. So that, you know, that was an interesting experience too. I had all this resistance and I guess I had a lot of, you know, my own judgment around, you know, I wouldn't pick up a book called Witch Please, but, you know, I kind of moved through a lot of that and I was like, it's catchy. It's catchy.
That is very true, yeah. I will say that I feel like the cover really does match the tone throughout.
Yeah.
I think it's bright, it's fun, and that you kind of brought in the beginner basics and made it light and fun and just really it's shiny, it catches your eye. Yeah, I can see why you would be resistant to the name, to be honest. The name actually drew me at first, but it gave me the wrong impression. I'll be 100% honest. It actually made me think that it was more like, here's all these pitfalls that beginners come into and let's fix those. And it was kind of more like a witch please, like, let's back up kind of thing. And that wasn't the book at all. And maybe that's just the way that I take that phrase. So I understand where you're coming from, but it also did draw me in. So I think they know what they're doing over there at Wiser.
Yeah. And one thing I kind of like about it too is it's almost like, the title kind of gets you to pick up the book, and then it's like, whatever gets you in, whatever gets you in, and then
100%, whatever gets you in.
Yeah.
Whatever gets you in the door. And, at the end of the day, you look at it and yes, the title is kind of provocative in a way, but being a witch is provocative in a way. And then the cover doesn't lie. It's like you're about to dive into some serious stuff. I really do think, it's pink. I get it, but it's still, it's if you know who Wiser is, it's serious stuff. And so that's why I think they weren't worried about giving you a pink book with this title. Is like, no. We don't play around. We don't pick people. And obviously it wasn't Wiser who originally picked you up. But I mean, I'm sure that their partner doesn't mess around either. And so it's like, okay, there's substance here. Let's bring in the fun, because you have a lot of fun. Your personality shows through. You're bright, bubbly, fun person. Obviously, we're having fun. So that's the feel that's in the book. I mean it. That's the feel in the book. This is fun. This is exciting. This is new. And I think really, if you hand this to a brand newbie, you're catching them in that moment of the door just opened for witchcraft for them. This is the perfect book to hand somebody who's like, all of the possibilities of witchcraft are right in front of them. Their eyes are huge. You hand them this book, and then all of a sudden they have this great beginner's like basic instruction that is kind and nice and fun. And some of the newbie books are very not kind or fun. They're do this, do that, be careful about this. This is going to be bad. You bring up all these like protection things in a positive way of, hey, think about this. Hey, this is a thought. This is a problem I had. I don't want you to have that problem. So here was my solution, and maybe it'll work for you. And it's that kind of energy that you bring out into it.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Because it really, really does feel like, all of my work, like since I started kind of blogging and teaching and doing readings and everything, it's always been serious work, but it's always kind of come from that place of, we can still have fun with it, like we can still look for the positives and kind of like go from it, on that kind of side of things. And I think what's cool about the book as well is like, you can go where you want from there. If you read that book and you're like, well, this was a great intro, but actually I want to go to the kind of like occult section next, I want to go down that kind of like more darker kind of occult vibe. Like I think that's more me. Then you can go there. If you want to go into Wicca, go in that direction. If you resonate more as like a light worker, which is, a phrase that a lot of people in my community would use for themselves, it can take you there as well and kind of go in that direction more of like manifesting and law of attraction and all of that kind of stuff. It's like, it's not a book that kind of puts you in any box. It's like, here's some basics, and then go where you feel called to go from there.
I agree with that statement. Very like just reading it is very much, I'm not going to put you in a box. You're going to find where you need to go. And there is no, what's a good word? I don't want to say religion, but there's no dogma. It is beginner witchcraft with no dogma. And I think that is going to be important to some people, that they get that just witchcraft without the dogma situation, so that they can feel that openness. Because every newbie book I read was Wicca based. Yeah, and nothing against Wicca. I mean, I still heavily use a lot of Wiccan things and still lean on Wicca a lot. I won't call myself a Wiccan now. but I still use a lot of that. So there's no negativity to that. But having just witchcraft in its purest beginner's structure, it's something that wasn't there before.
Yeah, and I think my my experience in the church helped me as well to kind of like come out of that and be like, I don't want to live I don't like. There's so many good things in all of these parts and all of these different kind of different movements of magic. But yeah, I've always struggled when someone will say, this is how you have to do this thing. Like, your spell will not work if you don't have this herb picked on a full moon from, wherever. And it's like, we don't have the same herbs in Australia that like a lot of these, in these witchy books. It's like, we don't have half of this stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like, well, you got to like use what you've got, right? Make it your own.
Being in the Sonoran Desert too, like the seasons are different. You have to readjust the whole wheel.
Yep. So, of course, Witch Please, Empowerment and Enlightenment for the Modern Mystic by Victoria Maxwell can be found on Amazon. But for those of our listeners that don't want to feed the Jeff Bezos demon, where else can we find this book, and where can we find you to follow you on social media?
Yeah, as far as I know, you can find the book in most online bookstores. And I know that a lot of witchy stores and crystal shops and things like that are also stocking it, which is nice to support your local witch dealer. And if you're wants to connect with me, the best way is to just go to my website, which is newagehipster.co, or you can just Google New Age Hipster and you'll find my website. And from my website, you can find all my social media and all of that stuff as well.
And you have a oracle deck coming out?
I have. I had an oracle deck come out last year. It was called Angels Among Us. The premise of the oracle deck is basically we made angels look like just regular people, because we wanted to really kind of bring the angels back down to earth and be like, you know what, they're just like people that you can sit down with, like have a beer with Jesus, have a cup of coffee with Goddess Isis, whatever your thing is. And so we've got a second deck in that series called Goddesses Among Us, which is coming out in October this year. So that's all modern goddesses to help people kind of connect in a new, exciting way with the deities.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, Jera, where can people find you?
Of course, you can find me online. I actually did change my Instagram handle, so let me pull that up here really quick.
No more underscore.
Oh no, there's still all the underscores.
Oh, okay.
Now it is AKA underscore Hagrid underscore cosplay. So that's definitely there on the Instagram. Now that con season is upon us, and hopefully with the dreaded virus starting to at least somewhat stave off, might be going to a couple more conventions here in the near future. So keep your eye open for some interesting new cosplay content from me. And of course, where can they find you, Autumn?
Well, I still have my blog, though it hasn't been updated in quite a while. And that is it's been a while. Iron Wolf.
You don't know your own site?
No, not anymore. Iron Wolf Circle on WordPress, and I should probably put a blog up about my experiences since our hiatus started. You can also find me on Facebook and on Twitter as Autumn Wolf, and Instagram. Our Instagram is controlled by me. That's Millennial Pagan Podcast, or Pagan Pod at Instagram, and also on our Patreon, which is Millennial Pagan Podcast or Pagan Pod also, and our Facebook.
And Vix, thank you so much for taking some time out to speak with us today. And hopefully, we want to make sure you have all the continued success and in your writings and in your oracle decks and everything that you're bringing to our witchy community.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really so much fun to speak to you both today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So from all of us here at Millennial Pagan Podcast, wow, it's been a little while since we've said this. Let's see if we can get it right this time. Merry meet.
Merry part. And merry meet again.
I didn't say mead this time.
Are you sure I heard a D?